From the time he began studying German in high school, Vladimir Putin probably already had his sights on joining the KGB. He got his wish, and way more. This is the story of Putin's KGB career, a career that took him right into the Kremlin as president of Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in Saint Petersburg, Russia, then known as Leningrad, on October 7, 1952. Although his parents Maria Shelemova and Vladimir Spiridonovich Putin had two other sons, they both died as young children. As a result, according to childhood biography, they became protective parents who did the best they could to keep Putin alive and well. Both parents worked in factories after the Second World War, and Putin himself claimed in his official state biography that he came from, quote, an ordinary family.
It was a simple upbringing, a communist upbringing. His father was a party member, while his grandfather used to be Stalin's chef.
His childhood involved practicing judo and reading spy novels. By the age of 14, he was excelling academically and was admitted to the prestigious school number 281 for high school, where he began studying the German language. Intellectual Takeout reveals that around the same time, Putin decided to have a go at becoming a spy and went to a local KGB branch. After asking for an appointment to discuss his future career, the receptionist put him in touch with a dutiful senior agent who advised him to join the military or study law, but in any event, not to contact the agency again. 5 years later, Putin followed the senior agent's advice and went to study law at Leningrad State University. While at university, Putin met Anatoly Sobchak, one of his law professors who would become important in his future political career. During his final year at Leningrad State University, Putin was finally contacted by the KGB. After being put on a probationary track, he officially joined the agency after graduating in 1975. A Wilson Quarterly article, The Once and Future Russia, explains that initially Putin was relegated to a local Leningrad branch rather than being given, quote, a more desirable foreign post. Former KGB agent Oleg Kalunjin claimed that all that office did was harass dissidents and ordinary citizens, as well as hunt futilely for spies. And despite the millions of rubles and thousands of man-hours spent, between 1960 and 1980, not a single spy was caught by the local Leningrad KGB. Putin was a, quote, low-level cog. Radio Free Europe reports that Putin's work with the Leningrad branch mainly consisted of recruiting foreigners who came to the Soviet Union and Soviet citizens who communicated with foreigners or were going abroad. In 1983, Putin married Lyudmila Alexandrova Shkrebneva, who worked as a flight attendant for Aeroflot at the time. The KGB, which stands for Komitet Gosударственной Bezopasnosti, was the Soviet Union's intelligence agency, security agency, and secret police rolled into one. Although the modern KGB was established in 1954, it had its roots in the Cheka, established by Vladimir Lenin in 1917. According to PBS, the KGB had their hands in everything from running the Gulag labor camps to engaging in espionage. The agency conducted assassinations as well, with nearly untraceable poison often a go-to weapon, according to Big Think. The Atlantic reports that Vladimir Putin was recruited to the KGB by Yuri Andropov, then chairman of the KGB, as part of the agency's attempt to bring in people from different societal groups. During the 1970s, Andropov developed a recruitment scheme to bring some new perspectives into the KGB and create an atmosphere for finding new ideas and dealing with the state's myriad problems. In 1985, Putin received a foreign posting, working in Dresden, East Germany under the cover of a translator. Although information on his time there is scant, his duties were apparently similar to those in Leningrad. The Washington Post reports that Putin likely sought out East Germans who had a plausible reason to travel abroad, such as professors, journalists, scientists, and technicians, who could covertly link up with agents permanently stationed in the West. But according to Politico, it's possible that Putin had a far more significant role. A former member of the Red Army faction, a far-left German terrorist group active from 1970 to 1998, claimed that Putin supported their operations. Since the organization had difficulty buying weapons in West Germany, they'd reportedly pass a list of weapons off to Putin and his colleagues, who would make sure that an agent in the West would set up a drop-off in a secret location. However, since most of the Red Army faction members are either in jail or dead, this claim is difficult to verify. In 2015, however, an investigation by Corrective revealed that Putin likely had more authority in Dresden than initially suggested, possibly responsible for a plan that involved blackmailing a professor with, quote, pornographic material. There's even a suggestion that he took part in an operation tasked with stealing technological secrets. Though little is known about Putin's Dresden assignments, he was rising through the ranks of the KGB during his time in East Germany. The Moscow Times reveals that by 1990, he had become a lieutenant colonel, and the year before had been given a bronze medal for, quote, outstanding service to the East German National People's Army. The KGB was closely intertwined with the State Security Service, or Stasi, of the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. The Stasi participated in their own intelligence and secret police activities, but the tie between the two services was so close that Stasi officers were considered, quote, Czechists of the Soviet Union, according to author John O. Kohler. East Germany was also significant for the KGB because it lay on the front lines of the Cold War. It was a place where agents could cross from one side to the other, and it held more than 300,000 Soviet troops and an assortment of Soviet intermediate-range missiles. According to a Stasi defector, the GDR could do nothing without coordination with the Soviets. The Stasi's surveillance operations were instrumental for the KGB. Monitoring hundreds of thousands of German citizens, the Stasi's amassed millions of documents, and the KGB kept tabs on those who could take justifiable trips abroad. In the secret Stasi files, over 10,000 people were marked as being, quote, of interest to the KGB. According to the New York Times, in 2018, Putin's Stasi photo ID card was even discovered in German archives. And although this doesn't imply that Putin worked directly for the Stasi, it proves that Putin had access to the Stasi's headquarters in Dresden, most likely for recruiting locals for his intelligence work. As the Berlin Wall came crumbling down, the tide started to turn. It took a month, but eventually the protests reached Dresden. Time magazine reveals that in 1989, German protesters gathered outside Vladimir Putin's office and threatened to storm the building, calling for an end to the Soviet-backed government. In his official biography, Putin claimed that he frantically requested instructions from Moscow but received no reply. The BBC reports that Putin and his KGB colleagues decided in lieu of official instructions, they should simply burn all evidence of their work. Putin himself recalls, I personally burned a huge amount of material. We burned so much that the furnace burst. According to Russia Beyond, the most prized documents went to Moscow, but everything else went up in flames. Although Putin realized that the GDR's collapse was, quote, inevitable, according to The Atlantic, what he regretted was the fact that the Soviet Union had lost its position in Europe. Although intellectually I understood that a position based on walls and water barriers cannot exist forever. But I wanted something different to rise in its place, and nothing different was proposed. That's what hurt. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, coming shortly after the end of communist rule in East Germany, was for Putin and like-minded colleagues a crisis of epic proportions.
When I say that the fall of the USSR was one of the greatest catastrophes of the 20th century, I'm talking about a humanitarian catastrophe above all.
By 1991, Putin had returned with his family to Saint Petersburg and retired from the KGB. But in 2004, he claimed that there is no such thing as a former KGB man. On returning to the Soviet Union, Putin initially planned on doing a doctoral dissertation and working at Leningrad State University. But after his former professor Anatoly Sobchak was elected mayor of Moscow in 1991, Putin joined his team as an advisor and, quote, head of external relations. But according to the two worlds of Vladimir Putin, Putin also continued his work as a spy. DW reports that Putin started working for the St. Petersburg City Hall 1 year before Sobchak's election. And from his earliest days there, his work came under scrutiny when it was discovered that Putin had permitted the sale of highly undervalued steel in exchange for foreign food aid that never arrived. An investigation recommended that Putin be fired, but his termination never came. From March 1994 to 1996, Putin served as Sobchak's deputy mayor. Putin was incredibly loyal to Sobchak, and when Sobchak narrowly lost the election in 1996, Putin left St. Petersburg. ABC reports that Sobchak continued to be Putin's mentor, though, gearing him towards national politics. Putin soon set out for Moscow and the presidential administration. In 1997, Putin was named Deputy Chief of Staff to Boris Yeltsin, then President of Russia. The following year, Putin was named Chief of the FSB, a successor organization of the KGB. According to Radio Free Europe, in 1993, Yeltsin had tried to dilute the former KGB's power by taking the Vympel Special Forces Unit out of the FSB. But 2 months after Putin became the new director in 1998, he brought the Vympel unit back under FSB control. Before long, Yeltsin promoted Putin again, this time to the position of prime minister on August 9, 1999. At the time, Putin was Yeltsin's 5th prime minister in under 2 years. CNN reports that Yeltsin claimed that Putin was the ideal choice to handle the Caucasus crisis. Putin would eventually stabilize that crisis. Many ended up criticizing his brutal response to the conflicts in Dagestan and Chechnya. It was clear, though, from the beginning that Yeltsin wanted Putin as his successor, and on December 31, 1999, as Yeltsin resigned, he named Putin acting president.
The secret agent who became president.
Vladimir Putin.
As acting president, one of the first things Putin did was pardon Yeltsin of charges of corruption that had dogged him when he resigned. The resignation, meanwhile, had triggered elections for March 26, 2000. Although Putin had arrived on the political scene as a relatively unknown face, ThoughtCo explains that his law and order platform and decisive handling of the Second Chechen War as acting president soon pushed his popularity beyond that of his rivals. And when the polls closed, Putin was elected to the presidency with 53% of the vote. According to Der Spiegel, after being elected in 2000, Putin went to the old KGB headquarters in Moscow and joked to 300 former colleagues, "Instruction number 1 of the attaining of full power has been completed." After becoming president, Putin stayed loyal to his KGB roots. Time magazine reported in 2015 that the group of generals and KGB veterans in Putin's inner circle had started to hold sway over Russian politics. According to The Atlantic, during a National Security Council meeting in 2016, 6 of the 8 people in attendance were KGB veterans. Putin wasn't the only ex-KGB agent to become the head of an ex-Soviet republic. Heydar Aliyev, the 3rd president of Azerbaijan, was the head of the KGB's Azerbaijani branch before becoming president. There's considerable speculation as to how much Putin's career in the KGB influences his decision as president today. Many of his outspoken critics have ended up poisoned or murdered, a tactic often utilized by the KGB. NPR writes, "Proven or not, the radioactive death of vocal Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko hangs like a cloud over Putin's head." Meanwhile, the murder of Anna Politkovskaya is thought by some to have been a way to silence her reporting, which, according to RFI, exposed the Russian president as a power-hungry product of his own KGB history.
Let me give you some names. Anna Politkovskaya, shot dead. Alexander Litvinenko, poisoned by polonium. Sergei Magnitsky.
Some outlets, like Foreign Policy, claim that with the FSB, Putin has essentially brought the KGB back into existence. Even its full name, the Ministry of State Security, was the same name given to Stalin's Secret Service, which operated from 1943 to 1953. And by combining domestic surveillance with foreign espionage under Putin, the FSB has operationally returned to its KGB roots. In the end, even though the Soviet Union fell, as Catherine Belton writes, the institutions the security men worked in did not break down, nor did their personal networks disappear. Having seen what mass uprisings can accomplish in Germany, in his time as president, Putin has been quick to suppress dissent. As First Post reports, Putin's security forces crushed a wave of anti-government demonstrations in 2012. Currently, the Russian president repeatedly jails opposition leaders and activists.